As the world turned to a new century and the coaster wars were at their absolute peak, Vekoma found themselves in the most unique position of any roller coaster manufacturer. On one hand, they were far and away the biggest manufacturer in terms of diversity of models and production capability. On the other, all other manufacturers had greatly improved track and train designs through the 90s, leaving their antiquated Aero-style track and profiling in the dust. Heck, even Aero themselves would fall into bankruptcy in a few years due to their unwillingness to innovate at the right time. While obviously coasters were still flying out of the factory at an incredible rate for them, they would need to start changing things, as eventually, parks would stop buying boomerangs and SLCs. But that would obviously start after 2000, as somehow 4 more boomerangs opened in Missouri, Germany, Israel, and the Netherlands. They would also open another 689-meter SLC with Batman the Ride at Six Flags Mexico and another slate of junior coasters. This year, 4 207 meters and 2 335 meters. This all seemed fairly standard so far, but Vekoma did have 3 big coasters planned to bring them into the coaster future. The first would be a clone of the popular Rock and Roller Coaster the year before, with Superman the Ride at Six Flags Holland, this time located outdoors so the twisted layout could be better appreciated. The park would also open a coaster that would go in the complete opposite direction of what you would expect with Vekoma, as Robin Hood would be their first wooden coaster. While the wood coaster world had advanced massively through the 90s, with CCI, DIN, and RCCA, the massive rides weren't always the smoothest. Vekoma's would also not be the smoothest, but feature an out-and-back layout that didn't rattle about too much. The final coaster of the year would be no simple wooden coaster though, as Vekoma would build a truly brand new concept. B&M and Vekoma had proved how popular their inverted coasters could be through the last decade, but Vekoma would take that concept a step further to give a true sensation of flight. The Dutch company would debut a model known as the Flying Dutchman, with Stealth at Paramount's Great America opening as the world's first flying coaster. After loading into a somewhat standard train with a large padded vest and lap bars, riders would be tilted to lay on their backs in the station and travel headfirst up the lift hill. After reaching the top, the track would flip over, dangling riders under the track with only the ground below for a brand new open sensation, taking riders from lie to fly. After a drop into a horseshoe-shaped turn, the ride would go back from fly to lie and through a vertical loop before going back to flying. The coaster would then fly into a double corkscrew finale, which were awkwardly shaped identically to the traditional corkscrews found on the sit-down coasters, before gliding headfirst into the brakes. As far as a prototype model, the new coaster had smoother and more fun transitions and shaping to their suspended looping coasters, but the new trains proved to be a maintenance nightmare for the model going forward. The next year would see a natural progression of new models, while also going back to the mass production and matching their most coasters for a year with 18. Cobra would open at Six Flags Belgium as, you're not gonna believe this, the 42nd boomerang around the world, alongside one of 2 wood coasters from the previous year. Loop Guru would have an identical track length and speed to Robin Hood, but stand slightly shorter and complete a more simple oval layout. The other would be Thunder Coaster at Norway's Tusenfryd, which had slightly less length but a much higher top speed, and a more interesting layout, more similar to the new GCI coasters at the time. The coaster began with a large swooping drop before many fast-paced and highly banked hills, with smaller pops of airtime and laterals. These 3 would end up being the only wooden coasters Vekoma would ever produce, as more companies such as GCI and later Gravity Group would essentially take the reins as wood coaster demand slowed. Moving on to the junior coasters, there would be 3 more 335 meters in Italy, Taiwan, and the Netherlands, a 207 meter in California, and a custom layout with Octorbahn at Toverland. This indoor coaster circled rides and play structures as the first coaster at this now large park. There would also be a ride simply named Roller Coaster in South Africa, with a custom layout at the time, but would later be known as the 247-meter coaster. Be sure to remember this ride for later. While Vekoma had advanced the design of their junior coasters for the last decade, they were about to reach a new evolution with the introduction of a new model. After building dozens of large-scale thrilling suspended looping coasters, they decided to scale the model down to create the suspended family coaster. This base model, the 342-meter, would debut at two Paramount parks, Kings Island and Canada's Wonderland, with layouts less than 50 feet tall. The basic ride would complete slow helixes and dips that would have been perfect for children, but unfortunately retained the poor tracking of their larger coasters, making these surprisingly rough rides. Those family suspended coasters would be joined by a pair of 689-meter suspended looping coasters in Germany and Israel, and two more Flying Dutchman coasters. These would open at two Six Flags parks, with X-Flight at Worlds of Adventure in Ohio and Batwing at America in Maryland. They would both use the same 1,018-meter layout, identical to the 843-meter prototype the previous year, but with a proper outward-facing double inline twist finale and an extra helix at the end. Like the wood coasters though, these two models would only see 3 installations each, with the problematic concept being improved greatly the following year with B&M's Air at Alton Towers, making these Vekoma dart throws ultimately unsuccessful. It wouldn't all be down though, as Vekoma would have one more suspended coaster innovation for the year. After the Invertigo model failed to catch on a few years earlier, Vekoma would certainly go big instead of going home with the giant inverted boomerang. This ambitious model would be the manufacturer's tallest and fastest coaster yet, and use a larger 4-wide train than they had used before, with unique staggered seating. Still using the Cobra roll and loop, these trains would instead be hoisted up massive 177-foot vertical spikes before flying through the layout with the loop now over the station. This would open as Deja Vu at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This would open as Deja Vu at Six Flags Over Georgia. This would open as Deja Vu at Six Flags Great America. Wait. These 3 coasters each stood tall over their respective parks, and while they still weren't the smoothest of rides, the intense layout became a fan favorite among many coaster enthusiasts. After years of extreme mass production, Vekoma and the rest of the industry would wind back down to earth as the peak of the coaster wars was coming to a close. 2002 would still have a slate of 8 coasters, and their first year since 1994 where all were different models and layouts. Most importantly, for the first time in nearly 20 years, this would be the first year without any new boomerangs. While the model had clearly run its course, its longevity is certainly commendable, and it wouldn't be the end either. Starting the year off would be a 207-meter junior, a third suspended family coaster at Australia's Dreamworld, and then a third and final rock and roller coaster. This would feature the original name at Walt Disney Studios Park in Paris, but a new theme, and become the second launched Vekoma coaster at this resort. Happy Valley Shenzhen would open another 785-meter mine train coaster, as well as the first of 2 SLC coasters for the year. Snow Mountain Flying Dragon would not feature the cloned layout of the past, but a brand new 671-meter layout. Standing slightly taller than the standard, this would be a more modernized layout, with elements more similar to their contemporary B&M. Dropping straight into a low turn, the coaster would fly through a vertical loop and Cobra roll before a first element for Vekoma, a 0G roll. This weightless element was standard on almost every Bolliger and Mabillard inverted coaster, and would be followed by a high elevated turn before the brake run. The other SLC would also be a new layout, as Fantasy Island would receive another custom looper to pair with Millennium. Jubilee Odyssey would be taller, longer, and faster than any SLC before it, and drop into another loop and Cobra roll as well. After a high turnaround, the coaster would soar through a sidewinder before a nice wing-over corkscrew finale. Along with those large suspended coasters would be another giant inverted boomerang, Stuntfall at Warner Bros. Park Madrid, and one more brand new model for the year. As the classic MK1200 track style was fading into irrelevance for more modern rides, Vekoma would attempt one final effort to revive the model. Using an updated and more open train, Gravity Max would begin up a standard 114-foot lift before the unthinkable would happen. Reaching the end of the lift, the track would just end before the entire track was tilted 90 degrees straight down. The train would then release and complete an admittedly very basic layout into a tunnel before a single loop and helix before the brake run. As far as a prototype model, this tilt coaster would be ingrained in the minds of people around the world for this one-of-a-kind, mind-blowing element, but again, it would be a model that would never catch on. Even more scaled back than the previous year, the 5 coasters of 2003 would have no new models, but continue to flesh out worldwide offerings. Deval Train would be yet another 207-meter junior coaster in France, along with 2 more family suspended coasters at Paramount's Carowinds and Wild Adventures in the US. Joining those would be 2 more SLCs, a standard 689-meter Titanide in Spain, and the second and final, larger 787-meter extended suspended looping coaster in China. (2004) would be a year of going back to basics, while still having minor updates to classic concepts. The Boomerang would return with 2 installations in Lebanon and Saudi Arabia, as well as another 689-meter SLC in Arkansas. The more interesting rides of the year would actually be the junior coasters, as the trains which had been standard for 15 years would see a slight update with new individual lap bars that would first debut at Bobbejaanland Land. Okie Dokie would have a custom layout that would drop over a lake before more turns and drops along the water. This train would also debut on the 335-meter Okeechobee Rampage at Cypress Gardens, along with the family suspended Swamp Thing. The year would see a new model as well, and be another entirely new coaster concept from Vekoma. In a brand new seating arrangement, riders would straddle a bike with a back restraint and be sat on motorcycle-themed trains. This leaned-over position really sold the booster bike concept, along with the new hydraulic launch system that followed. Intamin had created this system a few years before, providing a quick acceleration of 0 to 46 miles per hour in 3 seconds. The bikes would then zoom through fast-paced low-to-the-ground turns before a couple bunny hills to end the ride. This small, novel concept again would not be perfected by Vekoma, but inspired plenty of manufacturers to create similar style rides in the future. The next year would have another 6 coasters, including another Boomerang with Cobra at Finland's Power Park. This featured trains similar to Gravity Max, sitting higher on the track and with more open sides. This would be followed by a 7th and final 342-meter suspended family coaster with Bat at Lagoon, along with 2 custom junior coasters in Asia. Herky and Timmy's Racing Coaster would be a basic layout with a few gentle turns at Korea's Everland, along with the simply named roller coaster at China's Amazing Park. This would be one of the longest junior coaster layouts, with over 1,800 feet to circle around the indoor park before a helix outside. Velocity would open at Flamingo Land as the second booster bike, with a similar but slightly custom layout to the original 600-meter, with a slightly longer track length and top speed. The last of the year would be Vekoma's 10th coaster for Disney, and be the last Space Mountain built. This would not be the intense looping layout in Paris, but instead the classic version from Disneyland, which was in the process of being redone by Dynamic Attractions at the same time. This would open at the new Hong Kong Disneyland, with the same trains and onboard audio that was being installed on the California version, but with more modern lighting effects than any Space Mountain yet. "2006 would see 6 coasters again, including 4 in Asia. Rolling Hills would be a 335-meter junior in Turkmenistan, and China would see Jungle Racing, a 785-meter mine train, and Motorbike Launch Coaster, a second and final 600-meter booster bike. There would be 2 SLCs for the year, both with the updated layout, beginning with Kumali with the second and only other 671-meter layout at Flamingo Land. The other, Golden Wings over the snowfield, would have the same layout, but an extra helix before the brake run, making this a new 748-meter model. The final coaster of the year would be yet another for Disney, and this time another innovative behemoth of a ride. Animal Kingdom had opened 8 years before, with only one truly thrilling ride in the simulator Dinosaur. The park was ready to not just add a big coaster, but the most expensive ever in Expedition Everest. This would bring the mine train into the 21st century, with higher sitting individual lap bar trains, and travel through a massive mountain range of the Himalayas. After a small, low-to-the-ground section, the trains would climb towards the Forbidden Mountain, before stopping at a piece of destroyed track. With seemingly nowhere to go, the trains would then roll backwards, due to a high-tech switch track which rotated to bring passengers into the mountain for an intense helix. After stopping for another show scene, the train would careen down the largest drop before an encounter with the most advanced animatronic ever built of a massive Yeti. The epic $100 million coaster would be yet another landmark for Vekoma and Disney, and another smooth coaster for Vekoma's portfolio. After years of coaster production unrivaled by any manufacturer, seeing Vekoma only build 2 coasters for the first time in 25 years was certainly surprising to see in 2007. These would both be second attempts of the suspended family coasters, with both featuring brand new lap bar only trains which greatly increase comfort for kids. The first would be known as the 294-meter on Jimmy Neutron's Atomic Flyer at Movie Park, Germany. This used a flat, spineless track to complete a simple layout with a large helix at the end. The second was Kvasten at Gronelund, with a larger height and track with a spine similar to the other junior coasters. This 395-meter model would dive under another coaster, along water, and through a figure 8 over pathways before a helix finale. Thankfully, the consensus was both of these rides were far better and more comfortable than their predecessors, something Vekoma definitely needed after decades of not making the smoothest coasters. "2008 would see another 5 coasters, beginning with 2 at the infamous Hard Rock Park. Shake, Rattle, and Roller Coaster is listed as a custom layout, but looks to be a 207-meter, and Eagle's Life in the Fast Lane is similar, listed as custom, but similar to the standard 785-meter mine train. Mammoth at Gardaland would be another custom mine train with 3 lift hills, and weaving through snowy rockwork with a prehistoric theme. Steel Lasso would open at Frontier City as the second and final of the 294-meter updated suspended layout, as the 395-meter would be chosen to move forward as the better of the 2. The last of the year would be the unique Montaña Rusa, standing hundreds of feet over Barcelona at the picturesque Tibidabo. After not being used for a decade, The coaster would interestingly use the custom MK900 trains, but is listed as its own new model, and follow a terrain layout along the hillside. This would be a good experiment for Vekoma, as more than anything, they needed to start building fun and smooth coasters, and this fast-paced outdoor layout would be well received by park guests. The next year, Vekoma would debut a coaster so incredible, so groundbreaking, the park would simply name it Innovative Roller Coaster. This would be the 17th 335-meter junior coaster in the world. This and the 18th 335-meter would open in Sweden, along with a custom junior coaster at Haiyu Dreamland in China. Shell's Shuttle would be the second longest junior coaster, and the only to feature 2 lift hills. This would tour the indoor mall and circle rides, including a large carousel. Next would be Dragon and Snowfield, a 785-meter mine train, and Dragon and Clouds, the second and again last 748-meter SLC with the extra helix. There would be a large one-of-a-kind ride for the year as well, and another attempt to revive a model that failed in the past. After their large train and sprawling flying coaster layouts of the past, the Stingray would feature a short 2-car, 8-passenger train and travel a compact layout in a super small footprint. Using an almost identical but updated seat and restraint style with rubber vests, the coaster would still tilt riders back and then climb a vertical lift. After a super steep drop, the ride would soar upwards over an extremely banked hammerhead turn over water, with well-engineered supports. The ride would then fly through an oddly shaped Immelman-like roll, before turning and diving headfirst into the brake run. While a novel concept for a smaller alternative flying coaster, it still wasn't the answer, and Vekoma would have to go back to the drawing board again for this model. The 2010s would begin with another 2 335-meter layouts in Israel and at the brand new Universal Studios Singapore. These would be joined by 3 more custom junior coasters, starting with Babylon at Russia's Happy Lawn. No videos of the ride could be found, but it looked to be another coaster that would travel around an indoor park with small dips. The second would be Voltron at Planeta Prima in Guatemala. This would be far larger than Babylon, but complete another scenic, compact layout around the mall and over play structures. The final would be Dark Ride at EDA Park in Taiwan. The coaster would drop out of the station before a dark, fast-paced layout through the mouths of monsters before a large lift back to the station. Also at EDA Park would be a brand new model, and a bizarre one at that. Originally planned to open in Orlando in the late 90s, this coaster and model, known simply as Big Air, would surprisingly be Vekoma's tallest coaster to this day. Essentially combining the giant inverted boomerang and sort of Intamin's half-pipe coasters, this would technically be Vekoma's first spinning coaster. 2 massive joined cars, awkwardly seating 12 riders, with restraints similar to Gravity Max, would be hoisted up a massive vertical spike. After reaching the top, the trains would rotate to face the ground and then drop up and down the U-shaped half-pipe. The train would then be caught and be brought back up to the top before rotating back forward and dropping again. While the coaster was tall and fast, better shuttle coasters on the market led to this being the only installation of this model, and even worse, the spinning function has been disabled for years. But much more successful and exciting would be the headline attraction at Universal Studios Singapore, Battlestar Galactica. After building 3 successful Bolliger and Mabillard coasters, Universal began experimenting with different manufacturers for their next few large coasters. Evoking the design of Universal's previous double B&M inverted dueling dragons, Vekoma would use one inverted intertwined with the more standard sit-down layout. More importantly than that, This would be Vekoma's first LSM launch coaster, using 2 parallel lifts to accelerate the trains through the layout. The red sit-down side, known as Human, would use a 4-wide train with seats from the family suspended coasters, and complete a generally tame layout with no inversions. The real star of the show would be the blue inverted side, Cylon. While Vekoma had years of experience building suspended looping coasters, this would be a total reinvention, with updated track and most significantly, 4 wide B&M-like trains. On those trains would be a new vest design, eliminating the headbang issue for so many of their previous coasters, and would soon become the new standard on all their thrill coasters going forward. The coaster would complete a cobra roll, corkscrew, loop, and zero-G roll, with Human circling around for many dynamic near-miss elements. While Vekoma still wasn't quite there yet to make this the best coaster it could be, Universal's trust in them would give them the confidence to go into the future with larger, smoother, and genuinely great coasters to come.